Hi, everybody. Mark Horner, Beyond 90 Seconds. Happy President's Day. Hope your day has been a good one. Yesterday, I started seeing some stuff on my social media feed about truckers, some truckers saying that they will no longer deliver to New York City or even New York State as a result of a court's ruling against former President Trump to the tune of more than $300 million against Trump. So I thought when I got up this morning, I'm thinking to myself as I'm pouring my morning coffee, I wonder if there's any more such talk or if this is something that's like a brief brush fire and it's been extinguished, or is this actually growing hotter? And I surfed through different podcasts and YouTube videos to see what was freshly uploaded and listened in on conversations. And indeed, it seems that more truckers are saying they will not go to New York City or even the state of New York. What I was struck by, and this is where the thrust of this video is going to go, is I was struck by the discourse in many of the programs and podcasts that I was watching, that people with different points of views, get this, were actually respecting one another, that they could have those different points of views, whether conservative or liberal or right there in the middle. And there wasn't this absolutism that you think like me or this certain way, or you're canceled from my life or this conversation. It's really refreshing in this day and age. And I'm glad to see more of this really give birth, I think, in the podcast format. And this is perhaps nothing new to you who have been following podcasts for quite some time. But it's a lot more interesting to me, and I think to many of us, when we have authentic points of view from people who are free to speak their mind. I mean, that's what this country is based on in many ways, is the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. When I was growing up, you had Democrats, Republicans, liberals all living in the same neighborhood, and we didn't cancel friendships because our parents or ourselves as kids didn't have the same political views. There certainly could still be respect. In fact, I found myself thinking of about 30 years ago when I was not a kid, but I guess right around 30 years old at the time, and I was a reporter living in Tucson, Arizona. And I was living in an apartment complex called, at the time, East Ridge, 600 North Pantano, Tucson, Arizona. And there were so many snowbirds living at this apartment complex, older people, retired people from different parts of the country. And in the morning, oftentimes, many people who lived there, and myself included, would go to the break room in the mornings to have coffee, donut, and they had all these little circular tables, kind of like a cafeteria in a way, but not a cafeteria. And people would sit around these tables and play cribbage, have coffee, donuts, and talk about what was in the news. It was very common. And there would be people from all points of view. And it was invigorating to have those kinds of conversations. You know, one of the channels on YouTube that I enjoy watching from time to time is the Cartier family. And they're one of the videos that I watched this morning. And what I like to do is just play a quick excerpt of these guys, these young men having their discussion. So let me just switch over there and we'll just play a very quick excerpt and you'll kind of get a sense for the energy.
Shopping is a $1 billion industry. It's so essential to this country. Like, how do places get restocked on stuff? Like, how do they get stuff from point A to point B, from the warehouse around the nation? See, they brought Colorado to literally an essential industry.
Damn near everything in this room.
Y'all wanna know crazy?
I'm a trucker.
Yeah.
Y'all know what's crazy?
So indeed, they're talking about the impact of the trucking industry. So what's cool about this for me is to see these young people talking about what's in the news today. And oftentimes when I've watched these guys, they can, it's the Cartier family. So I'm under the impression I've always been under the impression that they're brothers. They can have different points of view and they hash it out. And there's no lack of respect, no lack of the love, so to speak, especially if it's your brother, right? Cartier family. So this is really refreshing to see, and I love to see the young people really just kind of, they're reaching for their phones in the middle of these videos and they're Googling things and looking up things and they're learning together and they're getting educated. So that I enjoy, and it reminds me of what it was like back 30 years ago in those morning coffee, cribbage playing, donut eating sessions where people oftentimes also had the newspaper out. And some of these old timers, they had nicknames like Preacher Bill, Jersey Bill. There was a gentleman in his 90s who was so mentally sharp, and he did he would exercise every day, and he had an excellent retention of what was going on in the news and would discuss politics. His name was Alexander Bunka. He went by the name of Alec, and he had been born. He had told us he was conceived in Ukraine but born in Canada, and I think that was probably around 1898 or something, if I recall correctly. And he was so tack sharp, but these conversations, they were so energetic, and yet they remained respectful, and I just love that. There was a whole nother level of it, though, oftentimes in the evenings on weekends, and that was poolside, and there would be these circular tables with the not the parasol, you know what I mean, above, and I'd sit around with these older gentlemen, and we'd drink some cold beers and talk about news and such, and we called that the wisdom table because it seemed that the more chilled beverage that was consumed, the more outspoken and the more adamant about one's wisdom people got. So we called that the wisdom table. But this is what I love, that can come out of these conversations where people are talking about the news of the day. Patrick Bet-David's podcast recently, in a recent episode regarding the border and aid Ukraine funding, to see the men on that podcast who appear there regularly just really expressing their deeply felt concerns, beliefs regarding those issues and prioritization of issues was, as Patrick Bet-David put, those are the conversations that are happening all over America right now with families and coworkers and friends, and we're in a very, very interesting time. But as long as we're allowed to express our views and hopefully maintain some respect in an age where the elbow room to have your own viewpoints sometimes feels awfully restricted in many ways, with many implications, it's still good that we have free speech. And I guess that's what I'm getting at here. That's the bottom line, is free speech and the ability, as long as we're not hurting anybody, right, to still oftentimes maintain respect. If we can't, with people who demonstrate proper discourse and respect to others, if we can't do that, it's a pretty sad state of the country. And unfortunately, there are deep pockets in our cities, primarily and elsewhere, where that's just not tolerated, it seems. What do you think? Just an off-the-cuff, non-scripted video at this time, but I would love to hear what you folks have to say down below in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, everybody.